To Studio 5. So we've all heard of a vegan diet, right? People have been eating a plant-based diet for years, but the vegan community is growing in part to a recent documentary that hit Netflix this summer. What the Health, as it's called, is a documentary with sweeping claims about the dangers of eating processed meat and fats. It even goes so far as to compare eating eggs to consuming cigarettes. And although a lot of critics disagree with those claims, the movie is causing many people to rethink where their meals come from. As always, we're turning to Studio 5 health and fitness contributor Melanie Douglass to help us sort it all out. Okay, here's the thing. You might think this is just one little documentary that popped up on Netflix. I'm seeing it everywhere. Like, girlfriends are posting about it on Instagram. People are rehauling their grocery lists. So knowing you and I were having this conversation, I sit down to watch it 2 weeks ago, and Melanie, I couldn't even make it through, as a journalist, I couldn't even make it through the first 20 minutes because it was just so outlandish and so dramatic. What's your take? There's my take. Now I'm done. What's yours?
Well, I'm going to try and get this into one segment, what I think. But I kind of felt the same way. I didn't expect it to be so outlandish. It's really one-sided, and a lot of things are really taken out of context or exaggerated. Like, they found one little thing and they said over and over and over again to really scare people.
There was a huge fear factor.
Yeah, the fear factor, when it comes to our health, it's not all or none. You don't have to be all plant or all meat. You don't have to go extreme with this. And I felt like the fact that they had to go the scare tactic approach made me feel like they had an agenda, and they used content that supported that one agenda.
Well, I say I looked at it with my journalistic eyes. It was so one-sided, right? There was only one message being put out there. And I have to say, the filmmaker himself was putting in calls to these organizations and ended up talking to the receptionist and acting like that one individual should have all the answers, right?
Yeah, like the receptionist paused for a minute and said, you know, someone calls you randomly and asks you about hard research interpretations, and the receptionist stalled for a moment, and he used that as a point to be like, see, the American Diabetes Association is out to get you.
Is there some truth to it, in all fairness? Is there some truth, some takeaways that we can glean from this particular documentary or this message to help us live healthier?
Absolutely, there's some truth to it. And the funny thing is it's things we've been saying, things I've been saying for years. And the government even says, we should eat processed meat. We should minimize our intake of processed meat. We should eat more plants. Plants, plants, plants. I mean, how many times do we say, eat more veggies, make half of your plate veggies? So everybody agrees plant food is good. Everybody agrees we probably eat too much meat. One thing I noticed throughout the movie is that it constantly showed fast food and convenience food. And that isn't necessarily about meat or protein or where you get your protein. That's about our lifestyle, in that we eat a lot of fast food. We eat a lot of convenience food. There was no mention of fitness. So, I mean, for me, you're going to make a movie about health and you're not going to talk about physical activity at all. That was a big miss for me as well.
So our lifestyle, our sedentary lifestyle, I should say, is definitely something that needs a brighter spotlight if we're going to talk about this concept.
Absolutely. I think lifestyle is 50-50. So you can't pinpoint all of our health conditions onto one thing. It's not about eggs. It's not about sugar. It's not about one thing. Your health is a lifestyle. And that lifestyle is how much you move, what do you eat, how much stress do you have? That's a big part of our lifestyle. And what are your genetics? So when we try to understand disease and what causes disease, you have to look at all those things. You can't just say, oh, it's bacon. Bacon causes diabetes and heart disease.
It's not that simple. Let's get into some of the claims from the documentary and just chat them over as we will. The documentary claimed that eating one serving of processed meat a day hikes your chance of diabetes by 51%. What's your take on that?
Okay, so this is where I'm talking about things are taken out of context or actually not even properly understood. I mean, when it comes to researching diet and disease, it's hard to understand, but I'll tell you this simple thing here. There's relative risk when we talk about disease associations, and there's absolute risk. And this was a fact that was misrepresented. The absolute risk of the claim was actually only about 6%. And that means you'd have to eat processed meat every single day to even have that 6% increase. So that 51% was not understanding the difference between these two types of risk when we look at disease. It was taking something out of context. And then they had to compare it to like 5 cigarettes in a frying pan and create this visual that really made it scary. But it's a misrepresented study.
So what's the takeaway then for the average woman out there when it comes to protein and meat?
So when it comes to protein, you can get protein from plants. You do not have to eat meat. We should minimize our intake of processed meats. So deli meats, Canadian bacon, sausage, ham, pepperoni, all that stuff, yeah, we don't need to eat that every single day. But you can have good, clean, wild-caught salmon. You can have omega-3 rich eggs. You can have organic beef, chicken, pork. So there are really great sources of meat as well.
You mentioned that visual of the mom. She's got cigarettes in a frying pan and she's preparing breakfast for her kids. That gets to this claim made in the documentary that eating an egg a day is as bad as smoking 5 cigarettes. Eggs, what? Eggs?
Oh, no, this is not true at all. Not true. In fact, so here's the lesson to be taken from this. This was one study published. As soon as it was published, it was basically laughed out of the research world. I mean, people were literally writing studies, letters to the editor, making fun of how flawed this study was. So it was one study. And so when you see something like that, a study that alarms you, Google it. Go to PubMed, and just type it in and see. You don't have to read the studies, but see if there are similar studies that are along those lines and proving that point. If it's just one, I wouldn't worry about it because there are random one-off studies all the time that can scare you.
I want to jump ahead of this last point made in the documentary. The U.S. government is encouraging Americans to eat foods that it knows is going to make them ill so that it will benefit certain food and drug industries. This did give a lot of people pause. It did a follow the money trail, right, to see where the ads were coming from and where the promotions were coming from. What do you take away from this?
I take away that that is true. I don't love the fact that our government is connected to lobbyists and brands. That's not where our nutrition information should be coming from. So that part of it is true. It's not great. But you know what? Truthfully, I don't think many people are using government sources for their food information. I think they're finding books and celebrity experts and websites. How many people do you know that really go to the USDA and they're like, I got my meal plan from the USDA? There's some good information there, but there's also some lobbyist, influence. And I don't love that as well. Bottom line, you go back to, even the government says, eat more plants, eat meat sparingly, get your body moving, and do all things in moderation. That's the thing. You don't want to eat the same thing every day.
Right.
You need variety. So there are so many different things that could cause disease. We're still learning, and there's so many different toxins that we interact with. So don't do the same thing every day.
Right.
Shake it up. Have fish, have chicken, have beans, have a day where there's no meat at all. Practice that variety.
And whenever it comes down to sensationalistic claims like this, we always hear that word moderation. So thanks for keeping us grounded. Thanks, Melanie.